Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast. And joining me to preview the Texans-Jets game, Rami Lavi, host of the In-Flight Snack, a New York Jets podcast, part of the Believe Network, also producer at WFAN Sports Radio. Thanks for giving us a few minutes, Rami. What's it like to been dealing with this Jets soap opera every week?
Well, first of all, I appreciate you having me. And yeah, just when you think it can't get any worse, they find a new low. And, the season ended week 1 when Rodgers got hurt. You could say otherwise. They were 4-3. They kept it afloat for a while. And credit to Jeff Ulbrich and Saleh and the defense for doing that. But really, at this point, it's like, I don't care about the wins and losses anymore. I'm just waiting for the next awful story to come out. Like, there was the terrible Jamal Adams story on Friday, and no one's even talking about it. By Monday, there's 3 new stories that come out. And then Tuesday, there's a new scandal with Joe Beningo, my colleague at WFN. It's a new thing every single day with this team. And man, it's tough to live through. It's tough to have to get on shows nationally and then locally and talk about it every single day. It's funny because, like, sports is supposed to be the thing that kind of, like, you can get your mind off of real things, right? Sports is fun. It's not supposed to be that serious. And yet we come on here and I'm getting migraines from having to talk about the Jets.
Yeah. Do you think there was any missed opportunities for the Jets to pick up a quarterback after Rodgers went down?
For sure. I don't think it was as big a mistake to not bring in a quarterback to start the year as some people, because at the end of the day, let's say Rodgers got hurt for a series or got hurt for a game or 2 or 3. The Jets could have stayed afloat. They proved that by being 4-3. You could stay afloat for a few games with Zach Wilson. But once it became clear that this was a season-ending injury, yeah, I would have liked to have seen them go try to make a move for someone. I'm not saying that they would be 8-4 right now, but I don't think they'd be 4-8 either. You're probably looking at a 6-6 team, 5-7 team. But that's the difference. Think about it. If they're 6-6 right now, we could be talking about Aaron Rodgers coming back in 2 weeks, and instead we're talking about, will you even want to stay in the offseason after what a mess it's been?
Rami, were Davis Mills or Case Keenum in the conversation after the Rodgers injury, either by, you've heard from the Jets, or was the fandom talking about those two guys as potential guys to deal for?
There was not a single guy that wasn't in the conversation on the fan perspective. We were talking about Kirk Cousins before he got hurt, and obviously Josh Dobbs, and we were talking about backups all across the league. Even Joe Flacco, you could have signed him. He was in here last year. You could have gone and signed him. Look what he did for Cleveland last week. Yeah, it didn't go great at the end of the game, but he started out looking really good. So I think, according to Jet fans, everyone was an option. And unfortunately, it seemed like for the Jets, no one was an option until they kind of like almost didn't want to, but almost felt like they had to pick someone up. So they picked up Simeon, and then obviously they just cut Tim Boyle and picked up Brett Rippon. But at this point, it's too little too late. Zach Wilson's going to start the rest of the way this season, barring injury.
How do you think Robert Saleh has handled all of this?
Poorly. At the same time, about as well as you could, and yet still did a terrible job, because it's not his fault. This is year 3 and the 3rd consecutive year that he hasn't had a quarterback. But again, this is a guy who last year, the locker room turned on Zach Wilson after he basically blamed the rest of the team and said, I take no blame for the loss against New England, when it was all clearly his fault. Not all, but it was clearly mostly his fault. Didn't take accountability. The team's walking around wearing Mike effing White t-shirts, So obviously the team loves Mike White. The team didn't love Zach, and Robert dealt with that poorly. He allowed that to happen. And now this year, he allowed the same thing to happen, where the team turned on Zach, and Zach got to the point where he's like, I don't want to play. And then Robert's like, well, I don't know what's going on. I'm not part of every conversation. I don't know what the guys are talking about when I'm not around. Well, it's your job to know. And I think Saleh cares a lot about the team. He cares a lot about the guys, but unfortunately, it seems like at times he lets the guys walk all over him, and he just seems uncertain. He doesn't seem to have a certain conviction. And I honestly don't know if he's a good head coach or not. I don't think we will get the answer to that question, because he's made some mistakes that are hard to come back from. And while it's maybe not fair that he hasn't gotten a real chance at this, that's how it is sometimes in the NFL. It's not always fair.
Is his job in trouble?
I think so. I think if you're texting with Joe Beningo, who's WFAN radio host, former radio host, and he's leaking your private texts publicly on WFAN on the radio, and then going on CBS Sports Network the next day and saying, yeah, we talked for 25 minutes. We're good now. We worked it out. If you're still maintaining a relationship with this guy after that, then yeah, that's a fireable offense. Aaron Rodgers is going on McAfee talking about the leaks. Well, guess who the leak is? It's Robert Saleh. It's your head coach. He's the leak. He's the one who's admittedly talking to a lunatic fan in Joe Beningo, who I love personally, and I love Joe as a radio host, but I don't think that the head coach should maintain, if he continues to maintain this relationship with him, that's a fireable offense. And I don't see how you could come back from losing 6 in a row last year after being 7-4. And I could see them losing out this year, losing 10 in a row to end this season. I just don't see how you could come back. You've seen this defense quit twice now, this year and last year. You're seeing the penalties, the lack of discipline. You're seeing guys complaining publicly on social media. He doesn't have control of this room, it seems like. And again, he's been dealt a terrible hand. He's had to deal with an impossible situation, and most would fail in his shoes. So, like I said, I don't know if he's a good head coach or not, but I think the way he's handled it, yes, is a fireable offense.
It seems like they're still competing, though. I mean, the defensive effort, they stay in games, all that sort of stuff.
They're still competing, but you talk about the Buffalo game and the Miami game, which really, like, you come out the gate and you give up a fumble on the first play in Buffalo, and then the first play against Miami, you get a tackle for a loss, and then a late penalty, a 15-yard personal foul. That's how those set the tones for that game. Those are the type of plays that you look at and you're like, this team is not ready to come out and compete. And I like the way they came back against the Falcons, and this defense played lights out against the Falcons. But on the offensive side, they couldn't do anything. And look, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to Aaron Rodgers. If Aaron Rodgers says, hey, this guy's staying, he will stay, because Aaron Rodgers is the one calling the shots. And if you don't know that by now you know.
Couple of connections. We know the Saleh and Nico connection. They work together over in San Francisco, but Texans fans spent most of the last couple of years not thrilled about Stingley being picked over Sauce Gardner in the draft. It looks much better the last 3 weeks for Stingley, but Sauce still having an incredible year. Isn't he something like second least targeted corner in the league this year, something like that?
You know, nationally, and I even hear some Jets fans talking about how, Sauce taking a step back this year. You guys are ridiculous. Like, this is one of the best corners in the league. And I think, like you said, Texan fans are starting to come around on Stingley. You're starting to see what he's capable of doing now. But Sauce Gardner, he's not Darrelle Revis in 2007, where he had that list of locking down literally every top wide receiver in the league week after week. But he's pretty darn close for a guy in his second year who rarely ever gets targeted. I thought last week was his best game of his season. He played in the run game. He's coming up and making tackles. The 2 catches he gave up, he tackled guys short of the sticks for 2-yard gains. I think he gave up a total of 10 yards, a 2-yard gain and an 8-yard gain that were officially credited, or I guess put on him. Other than that, this guy has been locked down in year 2. I think he's getting called a little bit more for his aggressiveness. He likes to tug the jersey a little bit. He's getting called a little tighter this year. But other than that, he's as good as it comes when it comes to corners in the league.
Is he just going to shadow Nico this whole game, you think?
No, he's not, and that's unfortunate. I don't like how the Jets do that, but I can't speak to what the Texans do. I know they run a lot of the same system. Robert Saleh said today in his press conference, it's like the Spider-Man meme where you're pointing at each other. Him and D'Amico. D'Amico also said earlier in the week that he learned a lot from Robert Saleh, where these defenses really mirror each other. And you look at it, it's a guy in Blake Cashman who played under Jeff Ulbrich. Obviously, Jeff Ulbrich was a linebacker for 10 years in San Francisco and is now the defensive coordinator for the Jets. And then he goes and plays for D'Amico and develops into this incredible linebacker. And the same thing happened here with Quincy Williams, where he plays and then develops into this great linebacker, obviously alongside CJ Mosley. So I think the defenses will mirror each other a lot. But one of the things that they do is they play a lot of zone coverage and they really stick to one side of the field. So Sauce will a lot of times be on the solo side of the field, and then DJ's on the other side with safety help. And DJ's been arguably better than Sauce. And a lot of that has to do with he gets safety help on that side. Whatever side of the field he's on, they're definitely leaning that way. But no, Sauce, we talked about it. We've talked about it ad nauseum on our podcast. It's just not going to happen. They don't make him travel. I wish it was Rex Ryan coming in here and saying, hey, Sauce, you're playing man and we'll figure out the defense around you. That's what he did with Revis. But that's not been the case with Sauce Gardner in Robert Saleh's scheme.
Another Texans crossover. The Texans signed safety Adrian Amos after the Jets released him. How did he look there, and does he still have gas left in the tank?
Yeah, I think that you can get a lot from Amos still. I think that was just a depth move for the Jets. They were kind of looking to see some of the young guys, specifically Ashton Davis, who made a big impact play on Sunday against the Falcons. So Quinnen Williams gets obviously the initial pressure and up front, and then Ashton Davis comes up and makes the play. So I think the Jets liked what they saw in some of the younger guys. And so it was more kind of like, hey, it was a numbers game for them. Obviously, the Texans have had injuries in their secondary. And it's like, hey, why not go get a guy who's obviously knows the system? And oh, by the way, even if he doesn't play this week, he can help us with the scout team, tell us what to look for with the Jets. This is the perfect time to go get him. I think it's a very smart move by that franchise to pick up a guy who's been not only can learn your system quick because he knows a very similar system, but can also help you, coach you on, hey, look at what's going on over there. So yeah, still a smart veteran, maybe not the player he once was, but still a guy who can get it done as in a depth role for the Texans.
What was the deal with Blake Cashman with the Jets? Was it just injuries that the reason they decided to deal him away? Because man, he's just, I mean, what a year he's been having for the I mean, we didn't see this coming for sure after he is good. He was all right last year, but this has been incredible.
Yeah, and sometimes that happens. We were talking about Jamal Adams on my show today with Bilal, and sometimes guys fit into different schemes and they develop and they learn something and like something clicks for them. Sometimes it takes a different scheme. So here, maybe it just wasn't the right fit. Obviously, he was playing next to CJ a lot. He was also more of a depth piece. He wasn't the starting linebacker here necessarily, but obviously something clicked under D'Amico, and maybe it's stuff that he learned, like I said, from Jeff Ulbrich and from CJ Mosley, and it's finally just clicking now. He didn't get a ton of opportunity, like I said, to be a starting linebacker here. So it's cool to see, but like, again, Jets fans are probably happy for him. It was kind of like DeMario Davis, who was really good here and then turned into all pro level when he went to the Saints. That kind of stung a little bit more. But the fact that we have CJ Mosley and Quincy Williams playing so well on this team, I think it helps kind of Jets fans kind of be like, all right, those guys are still playing really good. And they're happy for Blake Cashman having success elsewhere. It's
an interesting matchup because the Jets have the third best pass defense, but the numbers suggest they're kind of near the bottom in the league against the run. Only problem for the Texans, they're terrible at running the football this year for the most part. What intrigues you most about the matchup this week?
The only way to beat the Jets is to let them beat themselves. I think if you start trying to go out there and make plays with CJ throwing the ball, that's going to give the Jets opportunities for sacks, for fumbles, for interceptions. And I know CJ only has thrown 5 this year, right? To his 20 touchdowns. So CJ has been incredible this year at not turning the ball over. But I think CJ is going to have to understand that maybe this is a week where he just takes it a little slow, tries to hand it off, because the Jets defense has been on the field for, it feels like 70% of the time this year. And that's why the run defense has struggled, because they're getting run down over the course of a game. They start the game strong in the run game. But when you see your offense go out there and 3 and out, eventually you're going to start giving up yards in the run game. And that's what happens. They get worn down and teams just run the ball on them. And teams play really conservative against the Jets because they realize we don't have to put up 15 points to beat the Jets. We could put up 12 points and probably win the game. I think that's kind of going to have to be the game plan for CJ and the offense, is just wait it out. Sometimes it's almost boring. Sometimes it feels like you want to take chances, but the more chances you take on offense, if you're the Texans, you're giving more opportunities to the Jets defense to make a play, and that ultimately can come kick you in the butt.
Is the run defense with the Jets more of, what the Jets are in the past game and what the game situations has been? Maybe teams, having a lead, they're running the ball more. Like, how has that worked out where, I think they're kind of near the bottom and the run, right?
Yeah, that's what I think it is. I think it's just you're giving up a lot of yards late in the game when teams are trying to run out the clock. And especially, like I said, when the team is on the field for 70% of the plays that the defense is out there, it's tough. It's tough to try and get stops late in the game. So teams are not trying to throw against this Jets defense. They don't want Sauce and DJ and Jordan Whitehead and all these guys to go make plays, because they can and will go make plays. Even Quincy Williams and CJ Mosley, those guys are going to make plays for you. So why give them an opportunity? Let's just run the ball, and run the ball some more. And eventually, hopefully we break through. And even if we don't, even if we get 3 field goals in a game, that's probably enough to beat the Jets offense.
What's the health situation with Breece right now? We're doing this Friday, almost noon. Where's he at?
I think he'll play, but it's interesting. I talked about this earlier today. Breece Hall, we have to remember, never played a full year in the NFL. Last year's rookie year, he gets injured, obviously, with the ACL. And a lot of guys, their first year off the ACL don't look very good. Breece was the rare thing where he comes back year 1 off an ACL and looks incredible to start. But I think he's starting to wear down a little bit, especially considering teams are putting 8 guys in the box and daring the Jets to throw. And the Jets had wide open wide receivers last week, and they couldn't find those wide receivers. So Breece is just running into the line over and over again. And I think maybe the combination of him never having to play a full NFL season and never having that experience of that wear and tear on his body, maybe he's hitting that rookie wall in year 2. And that combined with, it's still year 1 off of an ACL. So this is a guy who, is still kind of recovering. I would expect him to have a little bit of a snap count. I expect him to play, but I expect we see Dalvin. And I hope, please God, I hope Izzy Abanikanda finally gets some touches in this offense, because we've been talking about it feels like for 3 weeks now. They trade away Michael Carter because of it, and yet we haven't seen, or they cut Michael Carter rather, and we still haven't seen anything from Izzy Abanikanda. So they keep teasing that he's going to get some touches. I haven't seen much of it, so let's see if we get it this week.
How's Dalvin look this year? Do you feel like he's lost something or just hadn't really got his chance?
He was really slow early in the season, but when he's had his chances the last few weeks, he's looked really good. And then sometimes I say, is the Jets offensive staff watching the game? That's sometimes the things that I say, because take it, for example, the game in Las Vegas where the Jets were really struggling offensively and they couldn't score. They could move the ball, but they couldn't score. Dalvin Cook had 2 runs in that game. I think 1 for 9 yards and 1 for 8 yards. And it's like, why don't you keep feeding Dalvin? He looks so good in this game. And they didn't play him again. Last week, there was a drive where they were riding Dalvin, and then they decided, you know what? Let's give him a breather. Let's bring Breece in. And then Breece got stuffed at the line a couple of times, and that ended that drive. And of course, after Dalvin fumbled last week, which ended up leading to the only touchdown of the game that the Falcons scored, so it sucks, but he basically was relegated to the bench the rest of the game. It's like, all right, you fumbled, you're done. Even though he was the most effective running back last week. So I think he actually has his legs underneath him. I don't understand why they're not riding him. They should hand it to him every single time. He earned that contract. He's here on a 1-year deal. You don't have to worry about running him into the ground. Run him into the ground.
All right. Now, if I'm guessing how this is going to play out, it's the Texans. They end up playing close games most of the time. The rain, I think, is not good news for the Texans, because with rain, that could mean turnovers. Turnovers, I think, are the one real thing that keeps this game close. With the Jets can cause turnovers. Like, how do you see it playing out?
The Jets they win and lose based on the turnover margin. The only way they win is by forcing turnovers and not turning the ball over. So that is a big factor. And it has rained every single Sunday in the Meadowlands this year. I am telling you, I can't remember a single game this year on a Sunday afternoon that it didn't rain. You're talking about the New England game. You're talking about, obviously, opening night on that Monday Night Football game, which ultimately this rainy field maybe contributed to Aaron Rodgers' injury, right? Atlanta last week, the Giants game. It feels like there's been rain every single week at MetLife Stadium this year. So I don't know, another Sunday with rain, and it's been like flurrying here, kind of snowing a little bit. So it's going to be freezing rain on Sunday. I don't know. The Jets said that they plan on having Zach let her rip. So I'd say that the Texans are going to get a chance for some interceptions in this game also, if the Jets really do plan on airing it out. So the turnovers could go both ways. Like I said, I think it's smart for the Texans to play a conservative game and let the Jets beat themselves.
All right. Remind us a little bit more about your podcast and how people can connect with you as well.
My podcast is the In-Flight Snack Podcast on the Believe Podcast Network. We have fun. Me and former Jets running back Bilal Powell, we talk all things Jets. We talk about his career. We have some guests on. We're hoping to have Ryan Fitzpatrick on at some point as well, former Texan. We talk to everyone. We talk about his career, different insights into the NFL. So even when the season's not going so great, we still have a fun time. And then I do some work with WFAN, producing live radio shows and doing a lot of their social media and digital content production. So we have fun over there. WFAN is like the father of all sports talk radio stations. It's the best. And so it's super cool to be there. And you can connect with me online at Rami_Lavi on Twitter, or X, whatever it is, at Rami Lavi, or Rami.Lavi on Instagram as well. And if you're looking for tickets this week, I have 3 tickets to the Jets Texans game. And I'm still undecided if I want to sit in the rain. I do want to see CJ Stroud. I really do want to see him in person, but I'm undecided if I want to sit in the rain and watch another Jets loss this year. So you can message me and we'll see what happens.
I've asked this to a couple of people, and, I'm a little, confused by it. CJ Stroud's 5th in the MVP voting right now. And I'm just curious, does that surprise you at all? Because he's now taken the second worst team in the NFL last year to the brink of we're nearly a playoff team. He's had 3 game-winning drives. He's played with 11 offensive linemen. He's had 6 starting offensive lines, and he's leading the NFL in yards. What do you think about that? Stroud's 5th behind guys like Brock Purdy, which I like Brock Purdy, but I'm just surprised he's being considered for an MVP over a CJ Stroud right now.
I always say this about the MVP. The MVP is a narrative sport. When you're playing Sunday at noon every week, you're not as likely to get as many MVP votes, right? That's just how it is. And Brock Purdy's playing in prime time, if not 425, damn near every week. So he's in the perfect offense. So he's going to get more votes. He's going to get more looks. Look at a guy like Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar Jackson has a real case for the MVP this year. What he's done this year with this team is obviously a great Ravens team, but Lamar's looked every bit as special, if not more special than he did in his MVP season. Not running the ball to the same level, but the way he's throwing the ball is incredible this year. So do I think CJ has a real case for MVP? Sure. But there's other guys. You talk about Brock. These guys, obviously, you talk about you're looking Kansas City and Philly. They're in primetime every single week. And so they're going to get a lot more of the attention nationally than when you're locally sitting in a market and watching CJ every week. I love watching CJ, but I can't tell you that I sat and watch him on Sunday at 1:00 every week. It just doesn't happen. You catch highlights, you watch him on Red Zone, you try and get what you can. But I think that plays a big role in all of this.
Oh, yeah. Well, I know it does. And it's funny because like Patrick Mahomes also ahead of him, he threw more interceptions in a game than CJ's throwing this interception. So, and really Mahomes, I love Mahomes, great quarterback. I think he's the best in the NFL, but there's no way if you look at the numbers that he's better than CJ.
He's not having an MVP season. No.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. Well, man, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you doing this. And hopefully we'll have a great game to watch on Sunday. I mean, the Texans, to me, they're the most exciting team in the NFL. Last 8 weeks, they've had 8 games decided by one score, and there's nearly a game-winning drive every single game. So it should be fun.
Yeah, should be really fun. I'm looking forward to it. I do think the Texans will pull away a little bit at the end of this game. I don't think it'll be a one-score game, but I do like. I look forward to seeing the Texans play in person.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.